A new video game generation is almost upon us, and that means we're already getting inundated with flashy trailers and promises that this is the biggest revolution in gaming since the industry started. But what it means for me is that we can start looking a bit further into the future. Where most games at the end of a generation fall into an almost copy-paste formula, new technology inspires surprising leaps forward that can revolutionize, I hope, the way storytelling works in video games. So I'm back to doing lists, and here's the 3 ways the next generation of games can improve on narrative and world building in video games.
Better round up someone else to help. 3 of you don't stand a chance against me.
Well, I could fuck you up by myself.
If I had a bag over my head and my hands tied behind... Actually, no, not even then. Nice meeting you.
Since the final days of the last generation, but especially coming of age in our current one, we're already in a place where games can tell deep and impactful stories that fully place you into the role of a complex character. These linear stories can be exciting, harrowing, and even bring us to tears. But it's safe to say that video games have definitely come into their own when it comes to telling meaningful stories where players control a set character through a set narrative. But where games still struggle is in how they deal with allowing you, as a player, to make in-game decisions. Though they have gotten much better at building in complex decisions with interesting consequences, even in the best examples out there, there is still a lot of jank. Sometimes doing quests in a non-prescribed order triggers the wrong dialogue, or consequences feel very badly telegraphed, like you don't know what you're actually choosing. Or they're too telegraphed, like the game needs to put the consequences of a choice in big bold neon when a more understated in-world response would suit. As console and PC power increases, hopefully the webs these choices create can be more seamlessly integrated into a player's experience of a story. What that would mean is less of a feeling like we're taking part in an obvious game system that we always notice when we make a choice. Instead, we'd simply feel like we were a character immersed in a world. One where every one of our actions has a reaction. From something small, like picking an apple off of a tree, all the way up to deciding who the next king of the realm is going to be. By fully building a game that truly makes players believe in its illusion, we'd experience a story that's almost alive. A seamless journey through all of the choices we make from the start to the finish. Right now, there are still limits to this illusion. Like the simple morality systems asking whether you killed anyone when you played through Dishonored, or the fact that the big decisions in The Witcher are always clearly telegraphed with a very video gamey countdown timer. But as technology continues to improve, my hope is that we'll be able to push against the walls of that illusion. That the choices we make, both big and small, will have reactions in a game's narrative and world.
This is the 27th of Last Seed, the year of Akatosh 433. These are the closing days of the Third Era, and the final hours of my life.
I got into gaming a bit late. I was in my middle teen years, and one of the very first games I played was The Elder Scrolls Oblivion. I remember it totally taking my breath away. Not because its story was particularly any good, but because it was a full fantasy world that felt totally alive. I could walk from village to village, talk to the different people who lived there, join and interact with different factions and guilds, or just sit and enjoy the countryside. It was Baby's first open-world game, and it left one hell of an impression. Since then, I've been chasing that first wondrous experience, and though a couple of games have come close, none of them have quite done it. That's why I was so excited about the potential of No Man's Sky back in the day. As advertised, it was a whole universe spawned from maths and the laws of physics that the developers had ordained. It was going to be a simple, simulated universe that we could all walk through and experience. The reality was that it turned out to be much more a survival game than a simulated universe. But its promise is still one I think about all the time. What if we could program a city, or even a planet, or a whole universe? Whether the explorable space was big or small, what would sell it is how alive it felt. What drives the inhabitants of this simulated world? The plants, the prey, the predators? Would it be possible to procedurally generate people who feel like they're real? Characters from all across the spectrum of humanity, some complex, some not so much, but a truly living representation of a superbly simulated world. Games have dabbled in this already, or as much as technical limitation allowed. There was of course the universe in No Man's Sky, but there's also the Nemesis system in the Shadow of Mordor series when it comes to building character. Overall, both end up being quite simple. But they are both older now, and perhaps are a promise of what could come in the future. I don't think this coming generation is the one to do it. That's probably too hopeful. But I do genuinely believe that one day we'll be able to turn on our consoles and our computers and step into a whole variety of believable, simulated universes. And like my first steps in Oblivion, they'll take our breath away. There's been a plague in the games industry for decades, and that virulent, fetid disease can broadly be blamed on corporate power and capitalism. But the brutal symptom that affects almost every single game developer out there is crunch.
Cap'n Crunch is a crunchy sweet part of a good breakfast.
No, not that guy. The other thing. The fact is, it's now well recorded that most game studios have a workplace culture that often involves employees working 6 or 7 days a week, with hours that go well into the night, and breaking points being so common that employees often end up having to take stress leave to recover from the trauma of their working environment. It's a standard practice for developers to work 100-hour working weeks, often without being properly compensated by overtime. The problem is, this isn't seen as a problem by many of the people in charge. On release of Red Dead Redemption 2, Dan Houser of Rockstar bragged about pulling 100-hour work weeks. And with the imminent release of The Last of Us Part 2, Naughty Dog's Neil Druckmann has said that his employees want to work those long hours. Just so we're clear, no, they do not want to. No one wants to. I used to have a job where I worked 80-hour work weeks, and I can tell you that it sapped every bit of joy and happiness I had in my fucking life. I had no energy for friends or family. I stopped exercising and taking care of myself, and I regressed into depression and anxiety. The thing is, game development is seen as a high-prestige industry, especially at award-winning studios like Rockstar and Naughty Dog. Those who work in that environment have to want to work long hours because they know that if they don't, someone else will take their job. So they grin and bear it because they know it's not any better anywhere else. This problem is endemic through the whole games industry. Reports of crunch have come out of every major game studio, from Rockstar to Naughty Dog to BioWare to Epic Games. So my hope is that as technology and computing power advance, game developers will be able to do more with far less. Hopefully, things that used to take hours will have their turnaround times reduced, which means devs will be able to go home and actually live their fucking lives. But the new generation could also mean the opposite. With more power comes more expectation, and devs could be put through the meat grinder to deliver more immersive blockbuster experiences. So it's important to remember that human cost. Even though we can enjoy and love so many of these games, it's important to remember how they're made. And it doesn't have to be this way. Things can be better and more ethical. And the best means of doing that is to keep fighting for game devs to finally get a fucking union. So they can group together, fight for their rights, and organize when their companies insist on using truly monstrous business practices. That is my biggest hope for the future of video games. That it could become an industry where there isn't a terrible psychological toll inflicted upon those who make the experiences and journeys that so many of us love. That as an industry it can finally mature, telling rich, deep stories that make all of us feel something, all while creating a healthy, happy environment for those who work in it. The future of games can be so bright. So let's make it brighter. Okay, final bonus Easter egg for those who stay after the credits. There's another thing I hope Next Generation does better. No more fucking hacking minigames. Please, ever. Stop it. Please God, stop it. Thank you.